Hey everybody, Quantum back here again, and after some time away, we are finally getting back into the swing of things, going to be back on that Lorcana grind, and we are in the middle of Store Set Championship season for Shimmering Skies. So let's go ahead and take a look at what's been performing and winning some Store Set Championships, since it's been a while since we did kind of a meta review. To start off in Florida, we have Emerald Steel taking the win here on a very small tournament, only 19 players, Ruby Sapphire taking second place. No surprise here. Again, if you've watched my videos from at this point over a month ago at the time of me posting this video, I did say that Emerald Steel was likely a deck that would be very powerful in this format, despite Bucky going away. While the Bucky line was very powerful and is probably the most powerful version of Emerald Steel when you did see it, it was less consistent in my opinion, because if you didn't see Bucky, your deck obviously suffered and you would have very little recourse following up because those Bucky decks usually didn't play Prince John. So your draw engines were really reliant on Beast, Tragic Hero, and Diablo, which, you know, to be fair, aren't too hard to interact with because they don't have ward. Whereas a deck like this, having the Prince John access, going back to the Ursula Deceiver, having a bit of shift lines with the Morph, which, you know, they play 4 Morph here, but what are their shift targets aside from Diablo, Beast, and Tinkerbell? Nothing, right? So I don't know if you'd really need 4 Morphs here, because how often are you going to be wanting to shift Diablo on Morph on turn 3, right? Just to get the exerted Diablo. But regardless, you know, the discard deck is still very powerful. You have Pete now as a new introduction in Shimmering Skies to this deck, which helps to insulate you from action-based wipes or song-based wipes, meaning that a deck like Sapphire Ruby really does rely on Sisu, which is, again, a card that I said would go up in price. It's just way too valuable, simply for the fact that it gets around ward, despite it being so expensive. But Sisu is really the only way that a deck like top-end control, like Sapphire Ruby, can deal with Emerald Steel now, because they just discard your hand faster than you can do anything, right? And if you take a look at this Sapphire Ruby list that came second place, losing to the Emerald Steel player, yeah, 4 Sisus, only 1 Be Prepared, which is interesting. But my guess is to why they would have lost, for 2 reasons that jump out at me right away, is this Chicha is very susceptible to steel-based removal. You spend a turn, you know, especially in the early part of the game, developing this Chicha, and they just strength it or let the Storm Rage on it, you just lose so much tempo, because the Storm replaces itself, it outs your card, you wasted a turn playing it, and then by the time you get to the top end part here, where, you know, you're trying to ramp with Fishbone and T-Pose, you probably have no hand at that point. So your Tamatoas and your Maleficents, you just never see them. So you really have to rely on almost shifting Sisu, I would say, onto the small Sisu, which again isn't the greatest, considering that your big threats in Emerald Steel have ward in the Muses and Prince John. Like, I don't think that other player that won wasn't playing any Annas, but it doesn't even matter, because the Muses can loop the Lucifer, the Muses can loop the Ursula Deceiver to protect it after it's exerted to sing. So you can insulate yourself with the Muses from some board wipes, ensuring that you have follow-up, but also, you know, with ward, the Muses and Prince John are just uninteractable, right, until later on in the game when you have these more widespread non-targeting removal, basically. You have an Emerald Amethyst tempo deck, which, you know, is a very strong deck, a good, very straightforward aggro deck that can do very well. But it does really lose to Emerald Steel, in my opinion, just because the Steel cards check a lot of these Emerald cards very, very handedly, as well as the X and 3 cards of Amethyst to a certain extent, right? So literally all the Madame Mim and Merlin cards as well. It's hard for a deck like this to really get any ground on the discard deck. What does help it is, you know, the Clarabelle and potentially the Ursula Sea Witch Queen shutting down the songs, and being big bodies that can be difficult for Steel to out. But overall, the Emerald Steel deck should be executing its game plan faster than you can draw with Amethyst, and faster than you can develop enough ink in order to play your top-end threats, similar to how it deals with the Ruby decks as well. So an interesting smaller Store Set Championship, and what's kind of cool is, you know, I guess you are seeing some bigger ones here and there, but mostly in America it looks like they're fairly, you know, around 20 to 30 people, fairly small, I would say. You have another Emerald Steel player taking this one here. This is the only deck list we see. They are on the Anna for the recycling with the Muses. Only 2 Muses, though. I probably want to see at least 3. I'll grab your swords here. Again, the Petes, Prince John, 4 Morphs, and you're only playing 1 Tinkerbell, 1 Cinderella, 4 Beast, and the 4 Diablo. the ability to shift beast on 3 is really that valuable, I guess, huh? Pretty interesting. But what's interesting about this cycle of store set championships is I believe, and I haven't attended one myself, just too busy obviously, but the prize card not being a meta relevant one in the Madrigal, as well as being given out to top 8, really reduces the incentive for people to spend an entire day traveling to another store to try to collect as many of these promos as possible. Like, I think I'm seeing them being sold for like $75 Canadian, which will probably continue to go down over the course of the month, compared to obviously Stitch, which was going for like 800, and then Ursula Deceiver going for 200, go down to 100. Not Ursula Deceiver, sorry, Ursula Sea Witch Queen. But yeah, so I just think it's easier for people now to just say like, hey, it's my local store. Other people probably aren't going to travel to it, so the attendance will be what it usually is, which is good for the locals. Anyways, in this one, we only have a third place deck list. Sapphire Steel making its way into the meta here. A deck that I think really fell off, unfortunately. Now, I know there are dedicated blue steel players out there, and they are very well versed with their deck. But I just think in this meta right now, it can be a little hard for this deck to execute its game plan because it is a slow deck. It is a control deck. And I just think the Ruby decks are higher impact. Obviously, with Steel, you get access to Fortisphere. But like between Grab Your Swords and Be Prepared and or Sisus, I'd rather the Be Prepared than Sisus. Their ability to more aggressively ink because they play a whole new world is something to consider, but as you can see, this player is not on a whole new world. They're obviously valuing draw engines with just the items, it looks like, and Hero, right? No Beast Tragic Hero, no whole new world. So very interesting take on their list. They've got Visions here to scry for their through their deck, Hades and Tinkerbell as their removal, and then 3 Ariel with the Lucky Dime to close games out, along with Simba as additional removal along with Tinkerbell. So an interesting list. I actually do kind of like this list. I like the more tempo-oriented strategy of I'm just going to continually try to develop my board, put up threats that can remove things, Hades, Tinkerbell, Simba, and then close games out with Ariel, Lucky Dime, Tamatoa, Lucky Dime. Pretty cool. Hiram still remains to be one of the best cards in the game, so any Sapphire deck running Hiram technically always has a chance despite being a slower control deck. So let's go ahead. Ruby Amethyst. Oh, no, I'm not even winning his store set championships, which is very interesting. I know he's in a very difficult one, but only getting top 8 at Kapow Comics. Okay, pretty standard list at this point. 1 library. That's the only, and the 2 Elsa. I think from what I saw a while ago, he was not on the Elsas. So interesting to see that he put 2 in. I think I forget what the player's name was, but his teammate or playing partner who also played Ruby Amethyst and gave him a shout out when he won the big 10K at the CCS was on 4 Elsas a couple weeks ago. Let's take a look at some European store set championships. Oh, we've got Emerald Amber, a deck that I think is definitely very strong. What was 9 rounds? Interesting. Okay. Coming out first, Battle Bear. We know that this is a big spot, often one of the first stores to get new meta tournaments going. We've got 4 of the 1-drop Kita, 4 Daisy Duck, and 4 Cursed Merfolk, 1 Lilo. So this is an aggro strategy, not even discard. Look how many 1-drops. That's a lot. Okay, 2 Invited to the Ball, 4 Piglet. This is a very interesting list. Haven't seen anything like this. 1 Anna, which is very out of place, I would say, or it looks out of place, and only 1 Lyle. So again, very, very interesting. But yeah, just a very aggro-focused strategy here. 3 Pegasus, no morphs, so just 1 shift target in the smaller Pegasus here. And Clarabelle, which should have, where is it? Yeah, okay, at least 1 shift target. They're not playing the 1-drop Clarabelle. Very interesting to see this Little John being played, though. Not really sure what that's all about. 4 Rapunzel. Okay, and 1 Chernobog. 4 of the Kita, Protector of Atlantis. I'm a big fan of the 5-drop Kita. And of all things, for this deck to beat Steel Song in the finals, that's quite remarkable because, again, the steel cards just check the Emerald cards so well, especially the aggro aspect of Amber also, right? Just Storm Rage takes out anything, Strength takes out anything. No Tinkerbell in this list, but you got 3 Zeuses and the 3 Naveen. So yeah, you would think that this deck would be well poised to beat aggro, as Steel Song should be. It usually is, especially with Robin Hood Shift Line still in the deck. Cinderella on 1, being able to sing these songs early to check the aggro. The Pete's would be useless. The World's Greatest would be useless into the aggro matchups. I don't know, like the Ursula Deceiver you probably don't need because you have the Cinderella, which you would value a little bit more. But Steel Song, still obviously a very strong deck. Ruby Amethyst coming in 3rd place. Very similar, if not the exact same list as Neumnatz. Is this Neumnat? No, this is in not in America. This is in Germany, I believe, right? So yeah, very interesting to see. It looks exactly the same. 2 Elsa, 1 Library, 1 Tremaine, 3 Medusa, 4 B Prep, and only 1 Sisu, which makes sense. You don't really want to play the big Sisu in Ruby Amethyst, in my opinion. 1 is fine though, I think. Let's take a look at Emerald Amethyst. Okay, so we got the Bonsai here. 3 Lyle, 1 Clarabelle, 1 Anna. Very interesting. On 3. 1 Cloud Kicker. Yeah, a lot of 3 drops. Yeah, 3 Clarabelle. Okay, I guess you're playing the 1-drop Clarabelle. I was going to say, if you're only playing this Clarabelle, this doesn't really make sense. Because in a deck like this, you're rarely getting to 7 ink. And if you are getting to 7 ink, you likely lost the game because you're an aggro deck and you want to win before that. The Ursula Sea Witch Queen for the shift onto the Ursula Deceiver. Very, very strong. One of the reasons why this ink pairing works so well is because you can develop this threat quite early on, and it's very difficult to deal with for a lot of decks. But yeah, this pairing being an aggro tempo strategy is just strong. But again, does get checked quite heavily by Steel. So the Sing Together list for the discard is interesting. The PPG Store Set Championship, that was in America. What else do we want to take a look at here? Something in Spain? Let's see what Spain is doing. Wow. Haven't seen this ink pairing since Atlanta, the very first DLC. But we have Amber Amethyst aggro, which, was a deck that people thought was going to be a force, right, with aggro. And you can see here, obviously, this is an aggro strategy. Less 1-drops than you would think would need to be played. But the 4 Daisy Duck and the 4 Maleficents are what you want to focus on. No Lilos in this one. 3 Befuddles. On the 2 slot, the 4 Chromacons, the 4 Knowledge, the 4 Piglets, some Simbas, and 4 Wendy Darlings. This looks like a pretty budget-friendly list, especially with Daisy Duck dropping quite heavily in price, as expected. Again, called this months ago, saying that the non-foil should drop to around what Flynn was, which is around $10 Canadian, which is, I think, where they're at right now. The foils will likely retain some value because it's a foil, but yeah, this deck looks pretty budget-friendly at this point. I think Maleficent should also be fairly cheap at this point. They should probably come back down to like $6, which is still kind of expensive. They should be like $3, in my opinion, but we'll see what happens with the next set. But yeah, nothing in here is really that expensive. Yeah, this Moana, I'm a huge fan of this card in aggro strategies. I think it is pretty underrated. Similar to like Bonsai, I think this card is pretty good. The only card that really is worth money now is the Madame M. Fox, still somehow holding up to $6 to $7 Canadian each, which is crazy for a starter deck rare. But again, we knew that this card was very good, so understandable. All right, I think that's going to be it for our return to Lorcana after a couple weeks away. Just was so busy. I do have a potential Pixelborn set up, so I'm hoping to do some in real life games that I can post for you guys for gameplay. So if you made it this far in the video, thank you again for watching. Let me know if you're competing in Store Set Championships, what you've decided to play. Personally, I think Blue Red or Sapphire Ruby and Emerald Steel are probably the strongest bets. Simply because they have the highest impact strategies, right? Sapphire Ruby is able to basically just get to the top end very quickly and then just have the strongest cards in the game on the top end with the Ruby cards. And then Emerald Steel can just control a game from very early on and just shut down a lot of strategies just by discarding your hand. Play around Steel Song, play around Sapphire control decks that are slower, similar to what you saw Zan do when he won the only North American DLC that we've had in this format. Anyways, that's going to wrap it up for this video. If you made it this far, thank you again for watching. Quantum is out.